They didn't just put the Americas on Europe's map. They set off a chain reaction that built the world we live in, for better and for worse. How did Columbus's voyages in 1492 and beyond shape the Americas we know today? What did his arrival mean for the people, cultures, and nations of this hemisphere? Stick around, because this story of wealth, loss, and transformation is bigger and messier than you might think. It's 1492 when Christopher Columbus lands in the Caribbean, thinking he's found Asia. Instead, he's opened a door to a new world that changes everything. This video is all about how his discoveries reshaped the Americas, turning native lands into colonies, sparking global trade, and creating the diverse, complex region we see today. We're diving into the good, the bad, and the lasting impact of his voyages on the world we call home. Columbus's arrival wasn't just a moment. It was a spark that lit a fire of change across two continents. His voyages brought wealth and opportunity, but also devastation to millions of native people. How do we untangle the mix of progress and pain that built the modern Americas? And why does his legacy still stir up so much debate? Let's break it down and see how his discoveries shaped the world we know. When Columbus landed on an island he called San Salvador on October 12, 1492, he didn't just find land, he started a process that would transform the Americas forever. His 4 voyages, 1492, 1493, 1498, and 1502, mapped the Caribbean, parts of South America, and Central America for Europe. He thought he was near Asia, but he'd stumbled onto a region with millions of people, complex cultures, and resources that Europe was hungry for. His reports to Spain triggered a wave of exploration, conquest, and colonization that changed the Americas' trajectory. Let's start with the immediate impact, the encounter with native peoples. The Taino, who greeted Columbus in the Caribbean, was the first to feel the effects. They were generous, trading gold and food. But Columbus's men brought smallpox, measles, and other diseases that native immune systems couldn't handle. Within decades, the Taino population dropped from hundreds of thousands to a few thousand. Some estimates say 90% of Caribbean natives died by 1550 due to disease, violence, and forced labor. This pattern repeated across the Americas as more Europeans arrived. The demographic collapse was staggering. The Americas in 1492 had maybe 50 to 100 million people. From the Inca in Peru to the Iroquois in North America. By 1600, disease and conquest cut that number by half or more. Spanish conquistadors like Hernán Cortés and Francisco Pizarro, inspired by Columbus's success, toppled empires like the Aztec and Inca, using guns, horses, and native alliances. The native population's decline cleared the way for European settlement, but erased entire cultures, languages, and histories. A loss we're still grappling with today. Columbus's voyages also kicked off the Columbian Exchange, a global swap of plants, animals, and ideas. From the Americas, Europe got crops that changed diets worldwide: potatoes, corn, tomatoes, cacao, and tobacco. Potatoes alone saved millions from starvation in Europe and Asia, boosting populations. In return, the Americas got wheat, rice, sugarcane, horses, cows, and pigs. Horses transformed native cultures like the Plains Indians, who became expert riders. But sugarcane led to plantations, driving demand for labor that fueled another dark legacy: the slave trade. The African slave trade exploded after Columbus. With native populations dying, the Spanish, and later other Europeans, turned to enslaved Africans to work plantations in the Caribbean, Brazil, and beyond. By the 1800s, millions of Africans were forcibly brought to the Americas, shaping the cultural and racial makeup of countries like Brazil, Cuba, and the United States. Their labor built wealth for Europe, but at a horrific human cost. embedding systemic inequality that persists in the Americas today. Economically, Columbus's discoveries made Spain a superpower. His reports of gold in Hispaniola sparked a rush for treasure. By the 1520s, Spanish conquistadors were hauling gold from Mexico and silver from Peru's Potosi mines, some of the biggest hauls in history. This wealth funded Spain's wars, art, and global power, but it also caused inflation that hurt Europe's economy. In the Americas, colonial economies grew around mining and plantations, setting up a system where raw goods went to Europe and finished products came back. This pattern kept the Americas dependent for centuries. Politically, Columbus's voyages redrew the map. Spain claimed huge chunks of the Americas under the 1494 Treaty of Tordesillas, splitting the New World with Portugal. The Spanish Empire built cities like Mexico City and Lima, blending European and native systems. Other powers, England, France, the Dutch, followed, carving out their colonies. By the 1700s, the Americas were a patchwork of European claims, with native lands divided and reshaped. This laid the groundwork for modern nations like the United States, Mexico, and Brazil, but also for centuries of conflict over borders and independence. Culturally, the Americas became a melting pot. Spanish settlers mixed with native peoples, creating mestizo populations that dominate Latin America today. Enslaved Africans brought music, religion, and traditions that shaped everything from samba in Brazil to jazz in the US European languages. Spanish, English, Portuguese spread, often replacing native ones. Catholicism took root, blending with indigenous beliefs in places like Mexico, where the Virgin of Guadalupe became a symbol of mixed identity. Columbus's arrival started this fusion, making the Americas a unique blend of cultures. But let's not sugarcoat it. The cost was brutal. Native peoples lost land, freedom, and lives. The Taíno were nearly extinct by 1550. In North America, later European settlers pushed tribes like the Cherokee and Sioux onto reservations. The slave trade brought unimaginable suffering, with effects still felt in racial divides and inequality. Columbus didn't cause all this alone, but his voyages opened the door. He set a pattern: claim land, exploit resources, dominate people, that other colonizers followed. The modern Americas reflect this mixed legacy. The US, Canada, and Latin America owe their globalized economies, diverse populations, and democratic ideals to the connections Columbus sparked. Cities like New York and São Paulo, built on trade and immigration, trace their roots to his voyages. But the scars, displaced indigenous groups, systemic racism, economic gaps between North and South America, also tie back to that first landing. Columbus's legacy is why we speak Spanish in Mexico, why corn is a global staple, and why debates about history still burn hot. The climax of this story isn't one moment. It's the centuries-long transformation that followed 1492. Columbus's voyages were the spark, but the fire burned through conquest, trade, and cultural mixing. By the time he died in 1506, the Americas were already changing, native empires falling, European colonies rising, and a new world taking shape. That wave of change created the Americas we know, from the skyscrapers of Miami to the rainforests of Brazil. So, how did Columbus's discoveries shape the Americas? They launched a new era: global trade, mixed cultures, and modern nations, but at a terrible cost. Native peoples lost their worlds, Africans were enslaved, and Europe grew rich. His voyages made the Americas a crossroads of humanity, but also a battleground of exploitation. The big question is, how did the next wave of explorers build on what Columbus started? That's what's coming next. Columbus's legacy is the Americas we live in. Diverse, connected, but marked by a painful past. His discoveries didn't just find a new world. They remade it, for better and worse. Thanks for watching. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share my video with others.